Unexpected beginnings. Sophie Winters adjusted her glasses as she peered into the microscope, analyzing the coral samples collected during her latest research expedition. The lab at the Coastal Marine Research Institute was quiet this evening, just as she preferred it. At 32, Sophie had built a respectable reputation in marine conservation, dedicated to saving dying coral reefs along the Pacific coast. "Dr. Winters, there's someone here to see you." Sophie looked up, surprised to find her assistant hovering in the doorway. "The fundraiser starts in an hour," her assistant reminded her, "and Mr. Reed's foundation is our biggest potential donor." Sophie sighed, glancing at her lab coat, stained with various marine substances. "Tell him I'll be right out." Nathan Reed wasn't what Sophie expected. Instead of the stuffy businessman she'd anticipated, she found herself face-to-face with a tall, casually dressed man with kind eyes and an easy smile. His dark hair was slightly windswept, and he carried himself with a relaxed confidence that seemed at odds with his status as CEO of Horizon Energy, one of the fastest-growing renewable energy companies in the country. "Dr. Winters, there's someone here to see you," he extended his hand. "I've been looking forward to meeting you. Your research on coral rehabilitation is fascinating." Sophie shook his hand, surprised by his genuine interest. "You've read my research?" he admitted. "Every published paper. Your innovative approaches to coral restoration could revolutionize how we protect marine ecosystems." Their conversation flowed effortlessly from marine biology to renewable energy, from conservation ethics to favorite dive spots in the South Pacific. By the time they arrived at the fundraiser, Sophie had forgotten her initial reluctance. The evening passed in a blur of conversations and connections, but Sophie kept finding herself drawn back to Nathan. There was something refreshingly authentic about him that set him apart from the other wealthy donors in attendance. "Would you like to continue this conversation over dinner sometime?" Nathan asked, as the event wound down. Sophie hesitated only briefly before agreeing. Their first date led to a second, then a third. Sophie discovered that beneath Nathan's success was a man driven by a genuine desire to make a positive impact on the environment. His company specialized in wave energy technology, harnessing the ocean's power without harming marine life. Over the following months, their relationship deepened. Sophie introduced Nathan to her favorite hidden coves along the coast, while he flew her to remote islands to witness successful marine conservation projects his foundation had funded. "You've changed how I see the world," Nathan told her one evening, as they sat on his yacht, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Before you, I was focused on the technology, the business. You've shown me the beauty worth saving." On their one-year anniversary, Nathan took Sophie to a small, private beach where they'd had their fourth date. As waves gently lapped at the shore, he knelt in the sand and opened a small box containing a ring with a blue diamond that matched the color of the ocean. "Sophie Winters, you have brought meaning and purpose to my life that I never knew was missing. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred Sophie's vision as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered, her heart overflowing with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Their engagement announcement made headlines in both the scientific community and business world. The wedding plans quickly took shape, an intimate ceremony on Nathan's private island with only close friends and family in attendance. Everything seemed perfect. Sophie had never believed in fairy tales, but as she fell asleep each night in Nathan's arms, she couldn't help but feel she'd found her happily ever after. She had no way of knowing that in 2 short weeks, her world would shatter completely. Shattered plans. Sophie stared at her phone, rereading the text from Nathan for the 100th time. "Need to handle something. We'll call you later." That was 13 days ago, 2 weeks before their wedding, and she hadn't heard from him since. At first, she'd been worried rather than suspicious. Nathan occasionally dealt with company emergencies that demanded his full attention, but when hours stretched into days, panic set in. Her calls went straight to voicemail. His assistant claimed not to know his whereabouts.
Even his closest friend and business partner, James, seemed genuinely confused by Nathan's disappearance. "We have to call the police," Sophie insisted, pacing across James' office. James shook his head. "His security team confirmed he left voluntarily, Sophie. The company received instructions from him to proceed with the Maldives project in his absence." "So he just left? Without telling anyone where he was going or when he'd be back?" Her voice cracked. 2 weeks before our wedding? The media coverage was relentless. "Tech billionaire vanishes before wedding," and "cold feet or foul play" headlines splashed across business news and tabloids alike. Paparazzi camped outside Sophie's apartment and the research institute. Colleagues whispered as she passed. Even her parents, who had been skeptical of her whirlwind romance, called daily with concerned questions she couldn't answer. Sophie canceled the wedding arrangements in a fog of disbelief. Each email and phone call felt like another cut, bleeding away the future she'd imagined. "You need to consider the possibility that he's not coming back," her friend Maya told her gently one evening after bringing over takeout that Sophie barely touched. "I just need to know why," she whispered, tears streaking her face. "What happened? What did I miss?" As weeks turned into months, Sophie threw herself into her work. The coral restoration project expanded to 3 new sites, and she spent more time on boats and in diving gear than in her empty apartment. The physical exhaustion helped numb the emotional pain. Horizon Energy announced Nathan's official leave of absence and appointed James as interim CEO. The press gradually lost interest in the story, moving on to fresher scandals. But for Sophie, the wound remained raw. One rainy Sunday, 6 months after Nathan's disappearance, Sophie finally packed away Nathan's things that had lingered in her closet. Each item unleashed memories. His favorite sweater, a book they'd read together, tickets from a concert they'd attended. She sealed the box with packing tape, as if containing a hazardous substance. That evening, sitting on her balcony watching the rain, Sophie made a decision. Tomorrow, she would accept the research position in Australia she'd been offered. A year studying the Great Barrier Reef would give her the distance she needed from this place, these memories, and the ghost of Nathan Reed. She fell asleep on the couch, emotionally drained but resolute in her decision to move forward. The doorbell rang just after dawn. Sophie jolted awake, disoriented. Who would be at her door at 6 a.m.? Wrapping herself in a blanket, she padded to the entryway and peered through the peephole. The box of Nathan's possessions slipped from her hands, items scattering across the floor. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she fumbled with the lock. Nathan stood on her doorstep, rain-soaked and haggard. But what stole Sophie's breath entirely was the small boy with messy brown hair clutching Nathan's hand, looking up at her with curious eyes. "Sophie," Nathan said softly, "this is Leo. He's 4 years old, and he's the reason I disappeared."
The return. The silence in Sophie's apartment hung heavy as Nathan sat across from her, the little boy, Leo, quietly coloring at the coffee table between them. Sophie had wordlessly let them in, more from shock than forgiveness. Nathan looked different, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes and a weariness that hadn't been there before. His expensive watch and tailored clothes had been replaced by a simple sweater and jeans. "I don't even know where to start," he said finally. "The beginning would be nice," Sophie replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Who is he, Nathan?" Nathan glanced at Leo with a gentleness that tugged at Sophie's heart, despite her anger. "He's my son." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. 5 years ago, before I started Horizon, I was in a relationship with a woman named Elise. We were together for almost a year before we went our separate ways. Amicably, I thought. Nathan's eyes remained on Leo. I had no idea she was pregnant when we broke up. She never told me. Sophie watched Leo carefully filling in a dinosaur with a blue crayon, his small face scrunched in concentration. The resemblance to Nathan was subtle, but unmistakable in the shape of his eyes and the determined set of his jaw. Elise was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer last year. She contacted me when her condition worsened. That text I sent you, I just received her email with pictures of Leo. Nathan pulled out his phone, showing Sophie the message that had changed everything. She didn't want anything from me all these years. She built a life for them in Switzerland, away from media attention. But she was dying, Sophie. She had no family, and Leo would become a ward of the state in a foreign country. So you just left, without a word? The hurt in Sophie's voice was palpable. I was in shock. I flew to Zurich that night, thinking I'd be back in a few days once I understood the situation. Nathan's voice cracked. But when I got there, things were worse than I imagined. Elise had weeks, not months. Leo didn't know me at all. The idea of telling you over the phone that I suddenly had a child. He shook his head. I convinced myself a clean break would be easier for you. Easier? Sophie's composure finally fractured. Do you have any idea what these months have been like? The humiliation, the worry, the pain? Her voice rose, causing Leo to look up anxiously. Nathan winced. I was wrong. Terribly wrong. Once I was there, everything happened so fast. Elise deteriorated quickly. There were custody papers, arrangements to make, Leo's fear and grief to manage. By the time I could think clearly, weeks had passed, and I was too ashamed to reach out. Sophie noticed Leo watching them with wide eyes. She took a deep breath, lowering her voice. And Elise? She passed away 2 months ago, Nathan said quietly. Leo and I stayed in Switzerland until everything was settled. We've been back in the States for 3 weeks, staying at my house in Maine while Leo adjusts. Why come back now? Sophie asked, the question that had been burning inside her. Nathan met her eyes directly for the first time. Because running away from you was the biggest mistake of my life. Because Leo deserves stability and honesty. Because despite everything, I never stopped loving you. Leo approached them, clutching his drawing. I made this for you, he said, shyly, holding the paper out to Sophie. She accepted it with trembling hands, a blue and green swirl that vaguely resembled the ocean. Thank you, Leo. It's beautiful. Daddy says you know all about the ocean, Leo said, his face brightening. Do you know about sharks? They're my favorite. Something shifted in Sophie's chest as she looked at this small person who had unwittingly changed the course of her life. Yes, she said softly, I know quite a bit about sharks. Nathan watched them, hope and regret battling in his expression. We should go. I just wanted you to know the truth, all of it. As they prepared to leave, Sophie found herself at a crossroad she'd never anticipated. The man she'd loved and mourned stood before her, asking for nothing but offering everything, the truth, a chance, a future she'd never imagined. Nathan, she said as he reached for the doorknob, come back tomorrow. We can talk more then. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't a promise, but it was a beginning. Building bridges. Sophie arrived at the small beachside park 15 minutes early, watching families enjoy the late spring sunshine. She spotted Nathan and Leo instantly, the boy racing ahead toward the playground, while Nathan followed at a measured pace, carrying a small backpack. He's been excited all morning, Nathan said as he reached her. He's not stopped talking about the shark lady. Despite herself, Sophie smiled. I brought something for him. She pulled out a small, plush hammerhead shark from her tote bag. They watched Leo navigate the playground, occasionally glancing their way as if ensuring they were still there. The domesticity of the scene wasn't lost on Sophie, how easily they might have been mistaken for a family. How are you really doing with all this? Sophie asked. Nathan ran a hand through his hair. Terrified most of the time,
Parenting doesn't come with a manual, especially not when you start with a 4-year-old who's lost everything familiar. His honesty was disarming. The company's running fine without me. James is doing a better job than I expected. And Leo? How's he adjusting? He has nightmares. Asks for his mom. The child psychologist says it's normal grief. Nathan's voice softened. But he's resilient. Yesterday he laughed for the first time since we left Switzerland. Really laughed. It felt like witnessing a miracle. Sophie studied Nathan's face, the same features she'd fallen in love with, now marked with new lines of worry and responsibility. The man who disappeared wasn't the same one sitting beside her now. I filed the adoption paperwork last week to make everything official. Leo needs stability. "Daddy, watch!" Leo called from the top of the slide, waving enthusiastically. "I'm watching, buddy. Great job!" Nathan called back, his entire demeanor transforming. "He adores you," Sophie observed. "I don't deserve it," Nathan admitted, "but I'm trying to be worthy of his trust." After the playground, they walked along the beach, Leo skipping ahead to collect shells. Sophie presented him with the plush hammerhead shark, which he immediately clutched to his chest with a delighted grin. "What's his name?" Leo asked, examining the toy with serious consideration. "He doesn't have one yet," Sophie replied. "He's waiting for you to name him." Leo thought for a moment. "Bubbles!" he declared, with the confidence only a child could muster. Later, as Leo napped on a beach blanket, exhausted from play and sea air, Sophie and Nathan finally had the conversation they'd been circling for weeks. "I want to be clear about something," Sophie said. "I didn't agree to these meetings because I've forgiven you. I'm here because that little boy deserves kindness, and because I need to understand what happened to move forward, with or without you in my life." Nathan nodded. "That's fair. More than fair. The man I knew, the man I agreed to marry, wouldn't have disappeared without explanation, no matter the circumstances." Sophie hugged her knees to her chest. "That's what I can't reconcile." "I've asked myself that question every day," Nathan confessed, "how I could hurt the woman I love that way." He paused. "When I saw Leo for the first time, something shifted inside me. Suddenly, I wasn't just responsible for my life or my company. I was responsible for this innocent child who'd already lost so much. I panicked, made decisions from fear rather than courage." Sophie watched Leo sleep, his small chest rising and falling, Bubbles the shark tucked under his arm. "I don't expect your forgiveness, Sophie, but I want you to know that I'm not asking you to become an instant mother. Leo and I are a package deal now, yes, but if there's any chance for us, it would be on your terms, at your pace." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in familiar hues of orange and pink, Sophie made a decision, not about forgiveness or their future, but about tomorrow. "There's a marine touch pool exhibit opening at the aquarium. Leo might enjoy it." It wasn't a promise of forever, but it was another beginning.
New horizons. The coastal lighthouse stood tall against the darkening sky, its beams sweeping across the water in rhythmic pulses. Sophie leaned against the railing, watching waves crash against the rocks below. Behind her, Nathan and Leo explored the lighthouse keeper's cottage, now converted into a small museum. A year had passed since Nathan's return, a year of careful rebuilding, painful conversations, and unexpected joys. Sophie had taken that research position in Australia, but with a modified arrangement that allowed her to split her time between continents. The distance had given her perspective, space to heal and to miss them both. "Sophie! Sophie!" Leo came running toward her, excitement radiating from his small frame. At 5, he was all boundless energy and curious questions. "The man said lighthouses used to save people from storms. Is that true?" "Absolutely," Sophie smiled, kneeling to his level. lighthouses guide ships safely through dangerous waters, helping them find their way home. Like you, Leo said with the simple wisdom of children. Daddy says you help us find our way. Sophie's heart tightened. She glanced up to find Nathan watching them, love evident in his eyes. Later that evening, after Leo had fallen asleep in the coastal cottage they'd rented for the weekend, Sophie and Nathan sat on the porch swing, a comfortable silence between them. I received an offer from the International Marine Conservation Coalition, Sophie said finally. They want me to head their new Pacific Rim initiative. It would mean less field work, more administration, but the impact would be significant. That's incredible, Nathan said, genuinely. You'd be brilliant at it. It's based in San Francisco, she continued, watching his reaction carefully. Understanding dawned in his expression. We could, he started, then caught himself. Sorry, I shouldn't assume. That's what I wanted to talk about, Sophie took a deep breath. This past year has taught me a lot about forgiveness, about the families we choose, and about second chances. The porch swing creaked gently as Nathan shifted to face her. What are you saying, Sophie? I'm saying that Leo asked me last week if I would be his mom someday, and I realized I've been thinking of myself as his mom for months now. Nathan remained quiet, letting her continue. I'm saying that the life I imagined with you didn't include a child, or long-distance work arrangements, or learning to forgive something I never thought I could. Sophie reached for his hand. But the life we could build together now might be better than anything I could have planned. Nathan. Sophie's voice was thick with emotion. Are you sure? I never wanted to pressure you. I'm sure about Leo, she said honestly, and I'm sure that despite everything, I never stopped loving you. The man sitting beside me now, the father who reads bedtime stories and builds sandcastles and puts his son first, he's someone I want to build a life with. Under the lighthouse's sweeping beam, Nathan pulled a small box from his pocket. I've carried this with me every day since I came back, he said, opening it to reveal a ring different from the one he'd offered before. Simpler, with a pearl nestled among small diamonds. Not the original ring. We're not the same people we were. But if you're ready... Sophie looked at the pearl gleaming in the moonlight. From the ocean? She whispered. Like you, Nathan echoed Leo's words. Our constant, our guide home. This time when Sophie said yes, it wasn't with the innocent joy of their first engagement, but with the hard-won wisdom of knowing exactly what she was choosing. Not just Nathan, but Leo and the unconventional family they'd create together. The wedding took place 6 months later on the beach where they'd first reconnected. Leo stood proudly between them, holding the rings on a small pillow shaped like a seashell. Their vows acknowledged the storms they'd weathered and promised honesty above all else. When the justice of the peace pronounced them husband and wife, Leo tugged on Sophie's dress. Does this mean you're really my mom now? He asked, eyes wide with hope. Sophie kneeled down, eye to eye with the boy who had unexpectedly captured her heart. I've been your mom in all the ways that matter for a long time, she told him. This just makes it official. As Nathan wrapped his arms around them both, Sophie realized that sometimes the most beautiful journeys are the ones we never planned. The unexpected detours that lead us exactly where we were meant to be. In the distance, the lighthouse beams swept across the darkening sky, guiding ships safely to shore. Sophie smiled, knowing she had finally found her way home.